There is something deeply unsettling when the person at the very top of military decision-making cannot clearly explain what they knew during an active operation. This issue is not about politics or personality. It is about trust. When lethal force is authorized, especially outside a declared war zone, every decision is supposed to be deliberate, documented, and accountable. If explanations keep shifting, it raises a basic question. Was control maintained, or was the system drifting while lives were on the line? If you care about serious accountability and national security, subscribe to the channel.
There's a lot of deflection going on there, just his body language as he talks about this. And then he uses the term fog of war as if that absolves you from responsibility, does it?
No, listen, it is September 2nd. This is the opening strike on a highly controversial air campaign that has never really been done before by the American military. And you have the Secretary of Defense saying that he didn't stick around for the whole strike. He had a meeting to go to, and he couldn't see the entire thing through. You were the Secretary of Defense. You can push the meeting, and you can stay for the strike, because lo and behold, conveniently, at the very moment that he walks out, apparently a war crime occurs. So everything that he just said there in those clips is fascinating. First of all, any, I guess, defense or other narrative that this boat was still operable is gone, because Secretary Hegseth just said it was on fire. And you have the President of the United States saying something that you would expect the President of the United States to say, which is that he's relying on his Secretary of Defense for this information. Well, guess what? Pete Hegseth doesn't have that information for you, because he walked out of the room. And now there's a 4-star general with a highly respectable career in the special operations community who's going to be left holding the bag.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like they really are throwing him under the bus. Let me just read what George Will, a conservative columnist, said about this whole thing. He says, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth seems to be a war criminal without a war, an interesting achievement. The killing of the survivors by this moral slum of an administration should nauseate Americans. A nation incapable of shame is dangerous, not least to itself. I would have expected, despite there's all this back and forth about who ordered it, who didn't. Let's put all that aside. They're in that room. They're asked about it. We know there's a second strike. Why didn't either one of those men say, we're going to look into this? Something like that should never happen in an engagement by the United States military. Why?
Abby, I can't even understand any of this Venezuela thing. To me, it is absolutely cuckoo crazy. Look, Nicolás Maduro and Hugo Chavez before him are corrupt, sadistic, cruel, thieves, authoritarian, anti-American son of a bitch. And what Donald Trump is doing is attempting regime change. I will be incredibly happy, elated, if Nicolás Maduro goes away. I don't care which way. But the things that Donald Trump is claiming regarding Venezuela, that they are flooding the U.S. with drugs, that simply is not true. The fentanyl that is killing all of these Americans is coming through Mexico. The people that the preferred route for drug dealers is through the Pacific and then through Central America, including the country of Honduras, where he just pardoned the former president that did flood American streets with cocaine that killed thousands and thousands of Americans. And then, you know, he's claiming that Venezuela opened up prisons and insane asylums and released all these people into the United States. That actually did happen. It happened in 1980 in Cuba, and we all saw it happen. I was in Miami when the Mariel boat lift happened. There is zero evidence that that has happened in Venezuela. What happens? He wants to do regime change. He wants his Panama with Noriega. He wants his Grenada moment like Ronald Reagan did. But he can't say that it's regime change. One, because it's highly unpopular with the American people. And because, two, it would require the authorization of Congress.
Well, and we're not even close operationally, right? We're not even on land yet, and we've already got a war crime, national embarrassment on our hands. We haven't even proceeded with the actual land operation.
And how much of the U.S. Navy arsenal is off the coast of Venezuela right now?
Absolutely, for some kilos of cocaine? Well, I mean, give me a break.
Batya, I'd raised this yesterday. I mean, I think one of the big question marks here is this a pretext for regime change? And if it is, what is our level of engagement going to be in that? And should they be transparent about it? I think those are really important questions for Americans who care. if they're on those battleships in the Caribbean, if they are living, there are many Americans in the Caribbean who could be, in the area. As Trump has said, the airspace around Venezuela is closed. So don't we deserve answers on some of those things? Even on a basic level, don't we deserve answers about who these men were? If he knew exactly what they were and what they were doing, don't we deserve answers about that?
I definitely want to know if regime change is happening, and I will be very angry if it happens and I was not informed. So the answer to all those questions, I always want more information. But I feel like we're in the midst of another Russiagate hoax. There was a group of Democrats who said you can refuse illegal orders, and now they are out there in search of a war crime, and there absolutely isn't one. So what happened was the DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel issued a classified legal opinion authorizing these U.S. military strikes. At that point, the Department of, I guess I have to call it War, issued the directive that we were going to start hitting them. At that point, Admiral Bradley gave the order for the first strike. Pete Hegseth watched it. The boat caught fire. Now, in order to establish that a war crime happened, we have to know that the boat was completely destroyed. The military action, which was authorized by the DOJ, under Article 2 powers, which Trump has the legal right to issue, that boat was destroyed, was no longer a threat, and that there were two people clinging to it for life who were also no longer a threat. We do not know that yet.
You don't really need to know
what
that.
happened
I tend to disagree. I mean, we do have a JAG lawyer who has a lot of experience with military strikes.
Please tell me, what am I getting
I think it's a really
wrong here? Because if the boat was only disabled and not destroyed, it is still a legitimate military target.
Hold on. Here's the main issue. Is it legal when if there are survivors clinging to whatever, is it legal to then strike them again? And maybe we don't know the full answer to that question, but that is the central issue here.
Can I just?
That's the central
issue. The question is not actually that. The question is
the question is actually that.
The whole thing hangs on whether the boat is still a military target or not.
The issue when it comes
to the legality
on
it when they hit it the first time.
The issue when it comes to the legality of the second strike, not the first one.
It's not whether there are people there.
It is
whether it's still a legitimate target.
No. It's what happens to survivors.
No, it's not.
And we don't know.
Wrong.
I think I'm going to acknowledge that there are things about this that we don't know. That we don't know where they were, what was the state of the boat, all that stuff. Sure, we don't know who gave the order, but I do think that is the central question, Margaret, that needs to be answered. The question is not the existence of the survivors; it's whether the boat is still a legitimate military target.
Margaret, hold on a second.
Is that not Margaret? I want Margaret to weigh in on this.
That's simply not true. Look,
why?
Because you cannot shoot survivors of a shipwreck that are clinging on for dear life in the middle of the ocean.
You're using the word shipwreck to hide the distinction that I am
I'll use Secretary Hegseth's word.
The word shipwreck is in the regs.
Yes, but I'm saying the whole point here is it still a legitimate target or not? If they can get on that debris and call for the rest of the narco terrorists to show up and save them, it is still a legitimate military target.
Okay, I'm going to defer to the expert here. Go ahead,
factually,
Margaret.
this just doesn't pass the laugh test. You're talking about two people stranded in the middle of the ocean, and you think we're going to call for backup. Can you please say, is that distinction between whether it is disabled or whether it is destroyed? Can we back up a little bit? Because I just want to explain sort of how an airstrike is prosecuted, right? Because first you have a target in the first place, and a target could be an individual. The target could be a building. The target could be a boat.
Say something.
And so this is why we need, and we talked about this the other night, we need a full investigation. What was the target? Because I thought the target was the drugs. Those are gone if the boat's on fire. Maybe the target is the so-called terrorists.
The target was the boat, according to all of the reporting.
So I think we should wait for an investigation to see what the target actually was. If the target was a boat, then we're in this place where we are using military force to target boats. What?
Okay, you don't think that the initial military attack was legitimate.
Can I make one more point? Because this entire hypothetical,
not even about the second one,
entire hypothetical that you're posing hinges on whether or not they could call somebody to be rescued. But if they're in a scenario where they need to call somebody to be rescued, they are shipwrecked. That is the definition of shipwrecked, and they cannot be targeted.
At the heart of this controversy is command responsibility. A defense secretary is not a passive observer. They are the civilian authority overseeing military force. Leaving the room before an operation is complete suggests either a misunderstanding of that role or a troubling comfort with distance from consequences. In modern warfare, oversight does not end when the first strike is approved, especially when follow-up actions can escalate risk, legal exposure, and civilian harm. This is why clarity matters more than spin. For deeper breakdowns like this, subscribe to the channel. From a legal and ethical standpoint, second strikes are not routine footnotes. They require reassessment of intelligence, proportionality, and necessity in real time. If leadership is absent or disengaged during that window, it weakens the safeguards meant to prevent mistakes or unlawful actions. My view is that civilian leaders should be most present at the most dangerous moments, not less. Walking away creates gaps, and gaps are where errors and cover stories tend to grow. If you want analysis that does not shy away from uncomfortable truths, subscribe to the channel. What troubles me most is not any single decision, but the pattern of explanation afterward. When narratives change, confidence erodes. The public does not need perfection, but it does need honesty and consistency from those entrusted with immense power. Strong leadership is not about never being questioned. It is about standing firmly behind decisions with transparency and responsibility. If this kind of clear-eyed discussion matters to you, subscribe to the channel. This debate ultimately goes beyond one strike or one official. It speaks to how seriously we take civilian oversight, the laws of armed conflict, and the moral weight of military force. A system that cannot clearly explain itself after the fact is a system inviting future failure. We owe service members and civilians more than vague answers. If you want more grounded, thoughtful coverage like this, subscribe to the channel.